Okay, for my game that I decided I wanted to make, it's called Personalis. And the reason I chose that title was because um, it means, personality in a different language. And this whole game is talking about different types of personalities. My game summary is it's your senior year and you're the most popular kid in school and everything seems to be going your way until you drive home one night and your life changes forever. I wanted this to be a game that could be relatable to kids now, which is why I chose, like I said, Personalis as the title and, this to be the basis of my game because, a lot of kids experience grief and they don't really know how to work through the 5 stages of grief. It's something that I faced at a young age, and if I would have had a game that could have helped me work through those stages, I think, it would have helped me work through it a lot faster. Um, but um, that's why I started with something that would be relatable for a lot of kids. My product specifications, the platform for this game that would be available for players would be for their computers, because a lot of kids spend time on computers nowadays, and it's a game that if kids could play at home or at school, but on the computers the players would use the arrow keys or the keys WASD to move around like in normal computer games. Um, the keys would also allow the character to walk or to run, and then the space bar to make the character jump, which, like I said, is normal um, for computer games. Um, my design specifications, we had to talk about, what was going to be the story outline, the character outline, the environment outline, outlines of challenges, and then the flow chart of the story. First, the story outline. So, like I said earlier, this whole game deals with learning how to move and work through the 5 stages of grief. Not a lot of kids know that there are 5 stages of grief, let alone what they are and how to identify them and work through them. So, my story outline is the player confronts important events from their past that has caused them pain that they never truly dealt with. The player must work through the 5 stages of grief in order to come out of the coma that they're put in. Because due to in the beginning when they're in the ordinary world and like I said everything was going great, they end up getting in a car accident which then puts them in the coma, and the only way to get out of the coma is for them to work through these 5 stages that they've never dealt with. The character outline, so there are multiple characters in this game, um, but when we talk about the main character, I decided that it would be first person perspective. So, because the main character is the hero and the protagonist, um, you take on the role of that character with ease. So, it is, like I said, the game is in first person. Um, so, you see things in the first person's perspective as you're working through the game because I wanted the player to take on the role as the character, as the main character, to be able to work through the 5 stages of grief. And then you have the mentor character, which is this character represents a character that was loved by the main character, but then revealed later in the story that the character is actually deceased, and that's the character that deals with the 4th stage of grief, which was depression, and it's that character that helps them get through all of the trials and tribulations in the beginning of the game to then be able to come out on top at the end of the game. But then there's also the antagonist in the game. I had more than one antagonist in my game. The first antagonist was time. So it wasn't an actual person, but a concept. And the whole fact is, the main character is running out of time because if they can't make it out of this coma, they will be stuck in this coma forever. And the only way to make it out of the coma, like I said earlier, is to work through those 5 stages of grief. Um, and then um, there are the altered selves of the main character. Um, that the character has to change back to how they should be, because in each um, trial that the hero, the main character, faces, it's an altered version of themselves, of a memory that they have, and they have to figure out what is wrong with the memory, like what is the altered state of the memory, and to change it so that it ends up having the original outcome, so that they're able to move through onto the next stage of grief. And my pictures here, the mentor I had was the dog, and one of the antagonists' time, and then the top picture is just showing from first person perspective. And then the environment outline. My game, because it takes place in the real world, but also in a dreamlike reality, there are 2 different environments. The environment of the game would be the memories of the main character's life, so memories from childhood, their adolescence, and their early adulthood. They don't feel as though they're memories, though. They feel as if it's real life and it's happening right then and there, because at the beginning of the game, the character struggles to cope with the fact that they're actually in a coma and in this dream-like state. The other environment of the game would be the hospital room that the main character is in while they're in the coma, because that's where you have the flashbacks of the family and the doctors telling the family that the character is running out of time or is making it out of the coma, or whatever it may be, because the character can also hear that during the game. Next, the outline of challenges. So as I've stated the whole time, the whole point of the game is for the main character to work through the 5 stages of grief. So my outline of challenges is every stage of grief is a challenge that the character has to face, because it's a memory that the character has experienced, and it's in the altered state. So the character goes through the 5 different stages, or the 5 different challenges during the game. The 5 challenges correspond to the 5 stages of grief. There's a challenge that corresponds to each different level of grief. And then, there are the 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. My flow chart, so this is just kind of briefly what would happen in the game. It's not as detailed as if you were actually playing the game, but in the beginnings, so kind of like the exposition of the game, is everything in your life seems to be perfect. It's your senior year, but then in the blink of an eye, your life changes forever, and this is when, they're in the ordinary world, and then they move into, they end up in a car accident, and then they're moved into, they're in the coma. And then the next part, so in the kind of like rising action as we're working our way up to the climax of the game, in the beginning, you have a realization that you're in a dream world, and then you go through the first 3 stages of grief, so your first 3 challenges. You face stage 1 of grief, which is denial, and then you move on to stage 2 of grief, which is anger, and then you face stage 3 of grief, which is bargaining, and then at the climax, you face the 4th stage of grief, which is depression, and this is where the main character really starts to deal with what has happened with the beloved family pet, and kind of understand, having a deeper understanding of what happened, and kind of letting go and moving through that. And then as you're coming down off the climax, you have, the falling action, which the doctor starts to explain to your family that you're coming out of the coma, and this is when you kind of are making your way towards the end of the game. And then you have your resolution, which is you return to the ordinary world, and your family explains what happened to you. And then you realize that you've worked through the last stage of grief, which is acceptance, and accepting the fact that that beloved mentor that the main character has while they're in the dream world they've dealt with the fact that that character, the beloved family pet, like I said earlier, has passed on. The next couple of slides are just kind of what I came up with for the game, and this is, expanded upon from when we did this in assignment 4.1, but the whole learning target of the game is the characters or the players are on a quest. So this is kind of for students 12 to 18 years. The learning goal of the quest is to help determine your self-altered memories from the real ones to make your way back to the real world. By the end of the game, the player will learn how to better cope with loss by working through grief, and the player becomes motivated to get back to the real world. And then you have like the background, which is what I've already said. Everything's going great, and then you have a normal life. You're the president of a club. You veer off the road and crash into a pole, and then you're still in the ordinary world, and this is when you slowly start to slip into unconsciousness. And then you have the call to action where you wake up, you notice you're at home, and this is where, things start happening, and you don't you don't want to accept the fact that, your dog's talking to you, and what she's telling you, with being the fact that you're in a comatose state in the hospital. And then you at first refuse to start working, or you refuse to go out there and, fight your way back and come back to the ordinary world. And then you realize that your beloved dog Daisy is your mentor, and she's going to help you through everything. And then you encounter like I said, your first challenge, which is the first stage of grief, which is denial. And it's a memory from your childhood that you relive. And then you have your threshold test where you finally accept that the memories you're going to be relived, that they're going to be hard to experience, but you have to work through them in order to come out of this coma. And then you have your second challenge, which is the second stage of grief, which is anger. And it's another memory you relive, which is from your adolescence, early-ish adolescence. And then you can kind of slowly hear another one of those antagonists coming in, which is, the doctors, the time telling them that, telling your family they don't know how long you have, they're going to go back for tests, that you're in a rough condition. And then you have your third challenge, which is the third stage of grief, which is bargaining. And this is something in, current day time. And then you realize, you have to keep your memories from being altered. And then throughout the quest, like I've said, you encounter those enemies, which are the altered versions of yourself. And then, you also have those allies that help you through. And then the fourth stage of grief, which was your fourth challenge, which is depression. And, you realize you're having to face that memory of something that, was the worst time in your life when you lost your family pet. But you're able to work through it. And that's like kind of the climax of the game. And then you have your culmination ordeal. So you realize you've stopped your memories from being altered. Now you must figure out how to get back to the ordinary world. And then the road back, one of your altered memories kind of helps you escape through the door to come back to the ordinary world. And then the last antagonist you faced again is time, and the doctors are slowly trying to bring you back. You are trying to make sure that you haven't run out of time, you didn't take too long, but then you come out of the coma, so you return with the XLAR, and you come out of this coma, and your family's there, and they tell you what happened, and you realize that you have worked through all 5 of the stages of grief, and the last one that you just worked through when you came out is the acceptance. You accepted the fact that your family pet, the beloved family pet is, not there, but will always be there with you in your heart and in your memories and things like that. So, yeah, by the end of the game, the character um, learns about motivation, staying motivated to work through the entire quest and get back to the ordinary world from the coma that they're in. And then they also learn how to navigate the 5 stages of grief, which is something that kids experience at a young age, but don't necessarily have something like a game to help them work through it. So that's the game that I put together, and hopefully you enjoyed it.